each other? Should we just do a quick whiz round so that everybody knows what area and names?
Alison Bergwood, specialist teacher in study support and dyslexia at BBL campus.
I was drawn study support mentor in here as well.
Jenny Campbell, study support mentor at BBL and Oxford.
I'm Anna Panther, study support mentor at Oxford.
I'm Tina Middleton, I'm a teacher in Foundation Studies.
I'm Laurie Granville, I'm a teacher in Foundation Studies.
Stephanie Bennett, I'm a new teacher in Foundation Studies.
I'm Karen Freeman, I teach in the workplace and traineeships. What else was I going to say? I said I'm a teacher, didn't I? CEP, it's Community and Employability and something or other.
I'm Peter Maring, I'm a teacher in Skills for Life.
Alistair Woodcock, coaching and mentoring manager across the group, work in HR apparently.
I'm Aidan Arnold, I'm a teacher of business here at Oxford.
And we have a fabulous student here who's doing a wonderful job of filming, and I'll try not to walk too much like this because I'm terrible.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, sometime in October, you would have completed a self-assessment, and when it came to what would you like for group CPD, you ticked this box. So hopefully everyone's here with a real inquisitiveness about learning dispositions. And it isn't rocket science, but what it is sometimes difficult to apply and infuse into learning. So that's what this afternoon is about, really. It's about, hi Alison, welcome. It's about understanding fully what learning dispositions are, why we need to know that, how that needs to influence the way we design curriculum, our delivery and assessment, and to think about the possible benefits for making successful learners. So we're going to cover that this afternoon. We've got an hour and a quarter. I do go on a bit, so if I'm stuck on something, give me a nudge, I don't mind. Okay, I'm going to chuck a question out, and that is, for you guys, what's it like living in 2015? And do this quickly, just straight from the gut, words that come to mind. Living in 2015, what's it like?
Busy.
Busy.
Complicated.
Complicated.
Expensive.
Increasing poor.
Stressful.
Baffling at times.
No longer private.
So connected.
Connected. Any thoughts?
Information bombardment.
Information bombardment.
Many different forms of communication.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
New things all the time.
Fast-paced, changing. Yep. Okay. The list is interesting, isn't it? Because we are teachers, we're educators, we're people that facilitate learning, and we're very mindful of how we feel in 2015. And I think that's really important because we have to also reflect on how our students feel and how they cope with existence in this very fast-paced and sometimes stressful and challenging time. Let's just flip that though, because I hate to always leave something on a negative hanging. If you flip those things, what are the sort of positive aspects of those things for living in 2015?
You can get any kind of information you want at any time, anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Accessibility.
Easy communication.
Yeah, easy communication.
Cheap electronics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Easy consumer with
Yeah.
potentially exciting.
Potentially exciting. Yeah, yeah. Okay. And we kind of need to be there, don't we? We need to accept that these are some of the challenges, and we need to take them into account when we're thinking about ourselves as educators and our role. But we also need to think about the flip side of it, the positives, and are we there to be able to deliver in an energised way those aspects of life in 2015 that are good through our learning. And it's quite difficult sometimes to line those things up because we're all on our own continuous journey of development. And we bring to our own profession dispositions according to what we've experienced previously. And I'll kind of unpack that as we go through it. Okay? So what's it like for a student, a young person in 2015? What are their challenges? How old are we
Filtering.
talking?
Filtering information. Sorry. No?
Yeah.
Yeah, filtering information. So there's a
Yeah.
vulnerability. It's
Yeah.
like, yes, I agree.
Choosing something out of the vast variety of what's out there. So
Yes.
finding the right path.
Yes. So making choices. Is there a mass variety of opportunity out there for our young people?
Depends on their prior experiences,
Okay.
because they can limit themselves,
Okay.
or do the opposite.
Yep. What are the challenges? What do we know about, either through research or our own experiences? What do we know about young people 2015?
Education's more expensive. Certain education is more expensive.
Yep.
There's less employment.
Less employment.
Less control in some ways, because there is a change
Mm.
in the way economies and societies are working.
Yes.
And whilst there's a lot of choice, apparently,
Yes.
I think the flip side of that is they have less possible power to influence the direction than we might have done back in the day.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. More.
There's more, they have to, there's more structure within education, so they're told they've got to do more older, so they've got to stay later, stay at college further, do more English and maths, so it's a bit more.
There are higher expectations from them now because qualifications has changed a bit.
Okay.
In comparison to just a few years ago.
Okay.
Huge competition. Huge competition for almost everything.
Yes, huge competition for almost everything. Yeah.
Peer pressure and expectations and Facebook multimedia thing, they've got all that going on, as well as education, as well as relationships.
Yes. Yes.
I think also money issues, because they've got the pressure of education, but they've then got loans to take out. They've got commitments at an age where we were bombing off and looking at the world and so on. Now they suddenly have these this huge amount of money they're going to pay back.
Yes.
And I think I do feel sorry for them for that, actually.
Yeah, I mean, research says that young people now, they experience anxiety and stress. They're uncertain of their futures because they're less easy to map out. They live in a much more violent world, which I think we would all agree with, and that in itself causes people to respond to their environment in particular ways. And any response to an environment, whether it's going to the pub every Saturday and being a bit worried that you're going to get into a scrap, or being in a classroom or anything, is conditioned through the way you experience it, and then you build dispositions to respond to it. So your average young person builds a set of dispositions to deal with learning, or to deal with life, or to deal with other things that enables them to cope with some of those challenges. Some of those dispositions may be quite strong and powerful and enable them to apply themselves, and others may be less strong. Okay? So the notion of dispositions is something that is developed over time according to your set of experiences. And we know that all of our learners bring very unique experiences into the classroom, don't we? Now, what I'm not going to advocate today is that each and every one of you becomes an immediate counsellor in your classroom. But I'm going to try and tease out how the notion of infusing dispositional learning into everything that you do can help learners to build habits and dispositions that will enable them to cope with some of the challenges that will come long after you finish teaching them. Okay? So that's the kind of aim of today. So we recognise then that, or do we recognise that one of the key elements of us being educators is to focus on the notion that we need to build dispositions? Would we agree with that? We're not just content deliverers. That's an important aspect of what we do, isn't it? Because we're getting people through qualifications. But we're so much more than that.
Can you just say what your understanding of disposition is? Because I'm a little confused.
Yeah. Okay. So
talking about dispositions, what do you mean?
So I have a natural disposition of curiosity. Okay, so because I'm curious, if something is left in front of me, I will want to fiddle with it and I want to work through it. If you don't have a natural disposition to curiosity, or you've had some negative experiences of it, that disposition won't grow. Yeah.
Okay, now
yeah.
you know.
Tying that up with what Ian said today, I'm very keen on the notion of mindset. This is really something that I just.
Yes.
Could we say that some students have a greater disposition towards responding to challenge with grit and some might have because of experience, have a disposition towards going, this feels too hard, it feels too difficult,
Absolutely.
I'm going to give up. Would that be another
Yes, that's a perfect example.
example of
That's
a
a really good
disposition
example.
towards?
And we'll unravel that.
So it's sort of a match to fixed and growth mindsets.
Yes,
Yeah.
most definitely, most definitely. Okay, what I want to do now is I want us to think, because one of the things that I'd like to be as an outcome at the end of this session is that we go away and think about how we might use our knowledge of dispositions to influence how we curriculum design or plan lessons and how we assess. So to start that, we have to think about the gap that we have currently between our educational system and that notion that learning is dispositional. Yeah? There's a gap in what we're doing, and I want you to just talk about the gap. It's quite a difficult conversation, but let's work out what the gap is, because we want to fill that gap. We know that those things are important. We deliver education in this way. What's the gap, and how do we fill it? So can you just work in sort of small groups, and we'll give it 2-3 minutes. I love this picture because for me it kind of describes it a little bit. You've got this fast-paced, really dynamic thing happening, and then you could be standing still. And the question behind the gap, or what is the gap, was to prompt you to think about how our education system, or how we manage our education system, could be standing still while everything else is sort of fast-paced, and to begin thinking about the gap, because any development session or any training session, or whatever we call this, meeting of people, should try to really probe things and get us to want to commit to making a change. So we've got to understand what that gap is, and reveal it for what it is, so that in our conversation we can think about moving forward. So what is the gap?
I mean, in a way, for me, I was just talking to my colleagues here, I think one of the most important gaps is that sort of induction time, or that short time when students are coming from school into college for the first time, where we have the opportunity of showing them, A, that they're wiping the slate clean, perhaps, and a new start. College is different. We use first names. We are treating them as adults, not as children, as at school, and just trying to build that rapport and that sort of open dialogue. And if we don't get that in that first period of time, I think, especially my experience with boys, is that it's going to be really hard, because they have such, certainly at BBL, you see such a strong concern for peer respect, yes. Yeah, right. So if you don't get in and get that sorted, so that's
I like
one
that.
gap.
I think that induction period where you're outlining what's coming and what's going to be expected and what's happening, and that's not just around learning, but it's around building you as a person as well. This is what we're embarking on, we're going to do it. Yeah. So knowing what the outcomes are. Any other thoughts? What's the gap?
We took a step back from induction and saying from school, it seems that from secondary it stops, the information stops. From primary it goes to secondary, from secondary it doesn't seem to reach FE unless there's been a particular issues, or that young person hasn't had more of a team working around them. And it would just be saying positive experience for the student if we had that information as a tool to support them, not to label them, not to judge them, but to kind of know what certain triggers were, situations, so we can get to know the student but be armed a little bit better, because we do have a short period of time when they first join us until it said, are they on the right course, are they not, and there's induction, there's a lot going on, so that information we thought would be quite helpful. And also transition, they come for an interview, they maybe come for a few days, that's it. It'd be nice if there was, when they finish at Santa, was more of a transition into college, which was, I don't know, a short course, not even that, just coming in, meeting the other students, getting to speak to the students rather than just staff, that kind of information.
It's some really nice ideas there, and that notion that actually there should be some knowledge coming along with the students about the way they respond to learning, whether it's positive, or of course enables everybody then to think about how you may work on specific dispositions. Who's the most powerful person to assess disposition?
Student.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll unpick that a little bit later. Anything else about the gap? So what we're kind of saying is that in our curriculum model here, we need to spend more time in induction and explaining what the goals and outcomes are and how we're going to get there, and that learning isn't going to just be about the subject, it's going to be about a wide range. We're going to use previous knowledge about people and let them use it and self-assess and position themselves so they know what they want to get from college.
Also, we were saying about what several of my points was that it's changed from, it sort of reflects what's happening in the economy, like you said about the dangerous world. It's the process product model that students now, I don't want to learn, I just want the qualification, and like I won't turn up, I'll just get it at the end. And we said about even at university level, it's the, I've got a huge debt now, where's my degree?
Yes, it's
This is commodification of education, as opposed to it being a process by which people become, I don't know, knowledgeable, learned. It's actually what I want a ticket that's going to get me, which is understandable when they're coming out with a humping great debt.
Yeah.
But it does create a gap, we think, between our understanding as educators and professionals, and the students are rocking up going, so where's my learning?
That is the gap.
Where's my notes?
That's the gap.
And where's my certificate?
Yeah.
And I've got to work for it as well?
Yeah.
What the hell?
So what we do...
So I think it's a real problem, that gap.
It is, that is the gap, and we need to work at that through our design and through the way we deliver to energise and re-energise, because students have low expectations because they've probably had quite a difficult schooling and their dispositions to learn aren't powerful.
No.
So,
And we also identified a gap between the curriculum. The curriculum from awarding bodies can be quite clunky. They're not very responsive, in my opinion, awarding bodies. And they kind of serve up these great things. Where you go, there's your criteria, there's your syllabus, there's your specification. And we don't necessarily do enough with it when we have all this difference out there in the classroom. You know, learning dispositions, preferences for particular ways of learning. And there's a gap between this great, rather clunky thing that they give us to deliver, whether it be an A-level or an MVQ or a BTEC, and what we may have to do with it in order to make it palatable, understandable for the students. And there's a bit of a gap there as well, I think.
There is. And we need to be aware of these things. And over the next few months, curriculum design will come up and course structure will come up. You need to keep these things in your head because they should influence the construction. So we've got a gap. We recognise that. I just want to pause for a second. So are we in agreement then that our job as teachers isn't just to impart knowledge? It's not about this subject. It is to prepare our students for both the present and a vastly different future. It's going to be different in 2 years, isn't it? Let alone 10 years and 15 years. Our country's future in the 21st century depends on people's creativity, problem solving, communication, collaboration, and creates new imperatives for our education system. Are we all in agreement with that? Yep. And I'm not saying here we're making hairdressers, engineers, motor mechanics, and all that. I'm actually talking about the stuff that's going to make a successful person to contribute to society. Yeah. And then it's our role to equip ourselves and the way we use our tools and our craft to get students to experience that so that they end up as successful people. The colleges that are doing really, really well at the moment, if you read their reports, it's not based on the success rates. Success rates continue to be really important. It's based on the stories that they tell about how their learners leave college and what they go on to do. And those progression and destination stories, they're going on to do amazing things. The success rates are okay, but the success stories and the successful people are very different. And the good colleges, the colleges that are thriving, that have a really good reputation, are those that are embracing the notion that learning has to be content and disposition. Yeah? Okay, really good news, and you probably all know this, but is that the brain is a muscle, and that it sculpts itself according to the experiences that you have, and that we can rewire and remodel through willful intention, application and practice. We can rewire our brains. And I tried this out because I thought I wanted to sort of prove it to myself, and I don't have a marker pen, but I set about trying to do a bit of rewiring and see if I could write backwards. So, really useful skill. So I did it, and I now can write backwards, and then I thought, well, if I can do that, I can write with another hand, so now I can write backwards with both hands. But, I wanted to test it out. Can you rewire? Yes, you can. And that's a really exciting thing, isn't it? It's so exciting. So you can just picture it in your classroom, just like a load of brains just sitting there with some really positive channels already made that they can bring to the learning, but some may need to be changed and obliterated, strengthened, etc.
If anybody wants to read more of a really entertaining book, I'm just going to give you a title if it's anybody's of any interest. It's called Power of Habit, and it's by a writer called Charles Duhigg. Interesting name. D-U-H-I-G-G-Y, I think. The Power of Habit. Yeah, Charles Duhigg. D-U-H-I-G-G-Y. I might have got the spelling wrong, but I think if you Google it, it'll come up. There's an unusual name. And it just, sorry again?
Nature of Habit.
The Power of Habit, I think it's called. I read it a couple of years ago. It's just fascinating about that.
Yeah.
About how people have had major brain trauma, strokes and the like, through various training and so on, have found ways that the bit that's damaged can be bypassed, and the path lays down new neural pathways. And equally, how a major stroke will wipe out certain things but not others. And so someone who has no capacity to retain anything in memory can still remember a route from home to a shop. I don't know why. It's just in some way it's ingrained in a bit of the brain that shouldn't be there because it got wiped out by this major stroke, and yet they can do it. But can't remember where the front door is in a house, and will be trying every door to get out of the house. Very interesting. Full of little stories, really readable, really fun book to read.
I think it's worth understanding that the brain is not a fixed thing. I'm just going to show you literally a 2-minute clip on something called neuroplasticity, which describes it really nicely, and then we can unpick what that means for learning. What does that mean for us as facilitators of learning? Yeah, but what is it also? Is it, can you do it one-off? You say, okay, today we're going to do communication. And by the time you leave this lesson, you're going to be fabulous at it. What's the implication?
It's knowing that it is possible, and it's a gradual process, and it's something that's supposed to be worked out repeatedly.
It is worked out repeatedly and intentionally. Yes.
But you've got to have the student on site to be able to do that.
You have. We'll come to that. That's an excellent point. Yeah. Okay. So, if I could use myself as an example, I am a complete introvert, absolute introvert, and my disposition is that if I can avoid standing up in front of you and talking in front of people, I will do that at all costs. I would, love that. I'd like to be sat over there, nobody looking at me. That would be amazing. But life doesn't work that way. That my disposition is to avoid doing that. So I've had to strengthen my neural pathways to be able to strategize of how I'll cope with actually standing up in front of people. And it's been a real challenge, and it continues to be a challenge sometimes. But that's the point about learning, isn't it? Is that you have to know what strengths you have in terms of your dispositions and what you bring to experiences and what you can't bring because it's not there at the moment. So often you see students and they turn up in their classroom and they don't have any sort of chats about expectations or even the notion of disposition or whatever you might want to call it. And then suddenly they have these mass expectations. You're a student now, you're a grown-up, and we treat you like a grown-up, so therefore you must. Yeah? Is in the light of what we know about having to practice, apply, understand, build new habits to be able to let go of the old ones regardless of how productive they are, is that going to work? What's the implication for how we teach? So this word infusion is really important. The notion that when you teach, you need to infuse into your teaching the capacity to have realistic expectations and get students to that place. Yeah? Because we know the challenges they're facing, and we know that those challenges often cause them to behave and bring with them whatever you might term it. You might call it behaviour, you might call it attitude, you might call it... But actually it's a disposition to learning that is hardwired because of previous experiences that have sculpted the brain to respond in that. But we now know that actually we can mess that around a bit and make it more positive, which I think is a really powerful thing. But you have got it in a nutshell. Repetitive, not single events, talked about, celebrated, and then it becomes something that starts to be channeled into that person's thinking.
I think for us who work in study support, we're actually very fortunate in that extent, because teachers, when you have an entire class, you've got to prepare your lesson, you've got to deal with all that and try to be aware of the students' individual needs and dispositions. But at least with us, we work in class and one-to-one, so we get to know probably anything, say 5 students in a class, possibly sometimes only 1 or 2.
Yes.
And you do have the opportunity to sort of keep reaffirming, saying, oh, you're really capable. No, you're much better than you think you are. And they keep saying negative things, I can't do maths, or things like, well, actually, I've worked with people who really can't do maths, and you actually can. And so we're very fortunate we can keep doing that. It is this continuous thing.
It's more naturally bound into your work.
Yeah, it is, which is very fortunate.
Okay, so dispositions are required, and so, you know, students come to us with labels. Those labels need to be put in the bin, really, if they're not positive. Dispositions are required. They are learnable, which I think is a really positive thing. They are repetitive patterns, so we need to think about how we identify the dispositions that we would find desirable in our learners to help them to succeed, and then we need to think about how we infuse that into learning. We consciously choose to use them. So I described to you that I have to consciously choose to use a set of dispositions that enable me to deliver training or whatever. They're not just things that randomly, mindlessly hit people. You know, they choose. We all choose, and you know that about yourself, don't you? You know the things that you enjoy and the things that you enjoy least, and you consciously choose to use a disposition according to that. But they motivate, activate, and direct our abilities. So you can do an all singing, all dancing, wonderful lesson that you think on paper is going to be such a hottie. And has it ever been there? And it's just gone, you think, whoa. And it's because the things that need to be in place in terms of addressing these dispositions and these things with students to actually get them motivated aren't in play at the same time. They're not infused in there. So sometimes life is very hard as a deliverer for those reasons. Okay, enough about that. So we've got a feel for the fact that dispositions of learning is really important. They motivate us to either engage with the learning or not. We can change habits. Our learners can change habits. What are they? What are these dispositions? Let's name them. Let's create a list. So pick the same groups, list of dispositions, as long as you can make. We have a notion of dispositions, and now we're going to label them, but then we need to do other stuff with that. So I'm going to do like a nice old-fashioned style and go, ooh, and everyone's going to give a disposition. Start with some.
Well, I'll start with cheerful.
Miserable.
Okay.
And Alistair can explain our thinking on
So,
that one.
what we came up with this idea that people can have a disposition, but actually you could put most dispositions at one or either end of a continuum. So you could pair them up and say, at that end of the continuum, the extreme, you'd have somebody who's like that, and at the other end you'd have the opposite extreme. But either extreme could be seen as being not particularly helpful, and what you probably want is people who are somewhat balanced in that disposition. The example we gave was, most people think, well, people who follow instructions, who are compliant, that's, you know, that's a disposition as opposed to being bolshy maybe, and wanting to query it. But you can think of instances in history where people have been overly compliant and have allowed really bad things to happen because they haven't stood up and said, actually, no, that's not good, that's not acceptable. So compliance and following instructions and being responsive is great, but if it went too far, you might end up with people who are overly compliant and allowing bullying or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice.
So we come up with, and we did that on as many as we could think of.
And I think the continuum will come to that because that's where the students get involved in understanding where the start point is. That's a fabulous bit of feedback, and we'll actually explore that more. But I like that idea of being either too miserable or too happy. You know, part of learning, if we're infusing it in, we're going to come to hairdressers a bit later, but imagine it, imagine it if you went into a hairdresser and someone came up to you, what do you want them to do? That wouldn't be good. Equally so if they went, hey, sit down, what, good to see. You'd be like, whoa, I've just come to have my do.
Yeah. Exactly.
So yes, so part of the learning is actually talking about that disposition in a way that unpacks it for the learner, so they understand how to apply it within different settings and contexts appropriately. So they understand it on a continuum of what's acceptable. I worked with somebody who was permanently, ridiculously positive. I just wanted to punch him because it was ludicrous. It's like,
How you doing, Peter? Great, everything's fabulous. Oh, you don't know what's going on out there in the world? Have you not read the newspaper?
Going back to
No, this was something at work. This was a lifetime ago, not this, Peter.
Because it's so on film.
Sorry.
You were the mood hoover to his.
No, you see, and again, that's the other end of the extreme. The mood hoover is somebody who's never happy. And I think, you know, if we're paying attention to what's going on in the world, we need to know that there are horrors out there, and we need to be aware of them. And people have said, it's all good, it's all positive, it's the positive psychology. I have no time for it. Because, to me, it's insulting to the difficulty that people face in the world. That's just my take on it. But you don't want to be ground down by that and say that's all there is in the world either.
No,
it's that continuum.
I mean, it's using jargon. I mean, it's really trying to make it fit for purpose, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's where we come in, because we can model.
Indeed, modelling.
Okay, yeah, switching back to dispositions then, and what Alistair was saying about this continuum.
Yes.
Cooperative.
Yes.
And uncooperative.
Yes.
So people can incorporate.
Yes, absolutely. Collaborative, non-collaborative.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, spot on.
I'm going to top one off of our list, competitiveness, which also comes on your continuum.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it can be very competitive or not competitive at all.
Yes, yeah, and that can be translated into other words like as enthusiastic and eager or not. Yeah, okay. Stephanie?
I'm probably going to go for help, which is like you get people who always want to help everything, but then you've got people who just
okay.
each other or in argument. That makes any sense?
It does make sense, absolutely.
Argumentative.
Okay.
Get those argumentative, and those who just don't want to get involved in any sort of debate at all, and think that if it's a debate, then it's an argument. So we need to clarify where things sit.
So is argumentation a positive disposition?
Depends on where you.
Sorry. It depends. It's continuum notion again, isn't it? It's when and where, isn't it? When and where. In a discussion, in a discussion, and you're talking about a topic, and everybody's comfortable and it's respectful, and the outcomes are okay. Yeah, argumentation is great, isn't it? It's such a great thing when you've got your point of view. Pub, 11 o'clock Friday night. No, not so much. Yes. Understanding your dispositions and what you have is then you know how to apply them in context, in settings, and the notion that we want is that our learners can go to a lesson and apply it, to work and apply it, to the pub and apply it. That they are much more in control of themselves as successful people. So, yeah.
Curiosity.
Yeah.
Or liking a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Choosing procrastination, because that's my disposition. Yeah, it's obviously a negative disposition. We all deal with that. But I would say sometimes I wish students to procrastinate a bit. I have few that just wants the work, they do want the work just done, and without thinking about the topic.
It's a wonderful thing, procrastination, isn't it?
Yeah.
Multiple lenses, looking at it. Yeah. Look at this thing.
Sometimes they don't think enough about what they write, and so they just start the task and
it's a
I wish they take the time.
Inquiring. If you switched it to a sort of more positive word, it's questioning, isn't it? It's saying, don't accept that. Can I look at it from multiple viewpoints? Can I put different lenses on it? Can I experience it differently? So it's brilliant.
Being patient.
Yeah.
Somebody might say, well, you're just putting it off. Well, actually, I'm waiting. I'm being patient.
That's a good one.
Seeing what comes out. So one person's procrastination is another person being patient and just waiting.
So when my manager says, have you done something? I'm just waiting.
I'm waiting.
Alistair. Go to Alistair about that one.
Unrealistic expectations.
Okay.
So if you're kind of learning a new skill, you expect to be brilliant at it, within the first few weeks.
Okay, that willingness to keep trying, to keep going at it, to persevere, perseverance, and then you'll get there. Yeah.
Easily distracted as well.
Yeah.
Especially with teenage students. So we all know that they can change so much in the space of a year, or 2 years, can't they?
So flip it to a disposition, a positive disposition label.
Ability to multitask.
I suppose they
Focus.
So, yeah.
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 Sometimes, you know, again in our situation, I was thinking of students I worked with in forensics who was Asperger's, and he kept gazing out the window like you saying, I think you need to be listening to this. And I thought that it was because of his Asperger's. Then after a while, as I got to know him better, I thought, he's just a teenager.
Yes.
You know, they can still be teenagers even if they
Yes.
have Asperger's, so it's like separating two things. So that was more part of him being a teenager, his disposition as a teenager rather than his condition.
Yes, absolutely. And Alison?
Just listening to everyone, it's not quite what we're talking about, but it's what strikes me. One of the first things I do at the beginning of the year, students that have barriers to learning, I'm interviewing them, and I'm looking to see the sort of learner they are. Well, of course, at Blackbird Leeds, all the majority of the lads come from practical subjects.
Mm-hmm.
No English, no maths, they get a real shock. But you can probably clump those students together as majority are visual or kinesthetic learners. Those are dispositions, you know, if you are very strong visual.
Understanding your
At
sensory
Oxford you've probably
pathway.
got more
Yes.
auditory and
Yes.
so on.
It is a disposition.
It is,
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely.
It makes a big difference.
In neuroscience at the moment there's a huge amount of work around this, and they've sort of defined accepted dispositions, although there's nothing wrong with anything that anybody's said here, is there, at all? And the list of accepted dispositions, because they've done research and they've done research into the brain and the way it works, and they've done studies, are a disposition to be independent, to be self-motivated, to be resilient, to be able to focus and concentrate, to communicate and collaborate, to be creative, to be optimistic, to be persistent, to take risks, to have self-control and self-management, and to be curious. So, at the moment, currently out there in the field of research and neuroscience linked to dispositions, they're saying those things are the things that actually we can prove make a real difference to people's success factors. And they're no different from your lists, are they, at all? What does this actually mean? Because listing them is great, isn't it? We can all list them, and we can all say, in theory, that's great, but actually how does that look? What does it look like on a daily basis in our teaching and learning? Because if we recognise it's important, we've got to sort of try to commit to do it. Has anybody been to an Apple store? Yeah, describe your experience. Overwhelming. Okay, yeah.
No seats.
That's a disposition when you unpack it. We'll come to it.
No seats.
Seats.
Interactive.
Interactive.
And just go in and play.
Yeah. Yep.
I'd say the opposite to that, actually. I'd say because I was like I couldn't do anything by myself. I went in, I don't know if it's just because I looked dangerous. I went in and there were like 6, 7 people coming up to me saying, oh, do you want to go at this? Oh, you want to look at this? It's like, well, I want to go. You know, so it's just, you just can't do
Such
anything.
a nice example. If you translate that into a classroom, such a lovely example. Yeah, okay. Overwhelming. Such a sort of strong feeling that people have when they go into classrooms and they're not quite sure, there's so many expectations and they can't meet them. What's the success factors? What's expected of me? Whatever. Yeah. What else? Laurie, you said.
Yeah, but then I've got a small child with me, so
Oh, right,
anything. No, I'm quite curious when I go in because I think it's something that I don't really know too much about, so I know there's an opportunity for me to learn something or experience something when I'm in there.
So you've got curiosity.
Yeah, and it feels different.
Yeah.
It feels.
Yeah. That's nice. It feels different.
Yeah. But
Not
not in a bad
curiosity.
way.
Yeah. Okay. So when I go in there, listen for my dispositions. Don't really want to be noticed, being the introvert that I am. And I think, ooh, that's good. So, oh wow. And I immediately start thinking of all the things I can do. But then pretty quickly, because I'm a bit of a technophobe, I think, oh, I can't do it. So I've gone from like skulking in, whoa, to, oh God, that genius person is going to come and talk to me. So I skulk like that, because I can't take myself to the point where I can harness my enthusiasm to go to the genius bar and say, please can you help me? Because my numptiness takes over, my sense of myself. That's how I experience the Apple Store. That's no different from the experiences in a classroom, is it? So what do we take from the Apple Store that's positive? and translate into the way we manage and design curriculum and use our learning environments?
Curiosity, sorry.
Curiosity, yeah.
Different things to try.
Different things to try. Exploration, curiosity.
Sensory, you know.
Sensory,
different-
using your own path,
yeah.
your sensory pathways, yeah.
Not to
Variety
make it
as well.
overwhelming.
Variety of example of ways of people accessing information. Different gizmos.
Yeah.
It was all steam powered when I was a kid.
Different ways of accessing information to learn about it.
Yes,
not being
and
given the
choosing
information.
which is right. Yeah.
Yeah, not being taught traditionally.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else? Think about how they are working with those dispositions.
There's people about if you want to ask,
Yeah.
and they will approach you. But I suppose it depends on your disposition, how you want to be approached, and whether you want to be approached, really. But there are people, lots of people around, aren't there?
If we think about the potential for fear that we all have when confronted with something new, and I guess the fear is I might not get it.
Yes.
I might show myself to be a bit silly, daft, whatever. Then maybe one of the challenges for the classroom for us is just what can we do to minimise that potential feeling? How do we make it feel safe as well as exciting? So safe can be boring, but we don't want boring, obviously.
No.
So how do we build in the safety and it's okay to get it wrong, nothing bad will happen, and therefore the excitement is the thing that, or the interest or the curiosity, whatever you want to call it. Maybe that's one of the...
Answer Alistair's question, anybody. And going back to the idea that we've said that we explicitly, overtly, intentionally need to build positive neural pathways to cope with those things so that we become risk takers, perseverers, all that sort of stuff. What do you do in your classroom to create an apple store of excitement and curiosity and exploration and engagement, but a safety net so people are willing to embark on the journey of building new habits? What do you do?
Well, you get the lesson objectives. This is what we're going to do today, so they know what's happening. We've got some activities for you to try. Use 2 or 3 different handouts, or whatever it is. Have a go. And I'm here if you get some.
Anything else to build on that?
It's actually included students as question and answer, but not actually be aware of the student is sort of frightened and just not pressurising, so they don't feel unsafe. I should think so.
What does assessment need to look like? What does assessment need to look like if you're asking them to be brave and you're asking them to do things and develop dispositions? What are you doing in terms of assessment? What feedback are you giving?
Give them the feedback, but not a numerical grade or a pass, so you can make it so that they get the feedback and do the peer observation. So I'd have Alistair's assignment, you read the feedback and then say I think it would get a merit or it'd get like 67% or something like that, so it comes from a peer rather than the teacher.
Okay. I'm thinking, like, today we're going to do something we've never done before. Some of you will like it and some of you won't, but work with it. Just work with it, because this is what it's going to look like. Like your objectives, really. This is what it's going to look like. We're going to do this. And some of you will feel really comfortable with it. And when we're doing that, one of the things that I really hope that you're going to be working on is this disposition, and label it. And do the activity and talk about it all the time. And your feedback has to be there and quick, formative assessment and feedback is really, really powerful. Really good. You said that you weren't going to do that at all. You've done this. Fantastic. You know, I've never seen you work so well with somebody. That's a real skill you're developing. Let's hold that for the future. You have to overtly talk about what it is you're seeing in terms of dispositional learning and assessment and formative assessment so that the person gets the hit to make the connection, to build the... Does that make sense? And that doesn't happen.
Is it that metacognition? I
It
think
is.
about people thinking about their thinking.
It is, absolutely.
People learning about their learning. So we kind of take it up a level and we say, it's not it's not content light,
Yeah.
but it certainly is not content driven.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly it. It's not content light because you've still got to deliver content, but it's not content driven. What's driving it is the activities, and the activities that then enable dispositions to be developed alongside. And you're talking about those dispositions all the time. Nothing worse than listening to somebody in a staff room talk really enthusiastically about Joe, who has finally managed to communicate so much better with their peer. And you say, you ask the question, does Joe know?
Go to his head.
no, I'm just going to log it on Home Monitor, or I'm going to do this. Is Joe going to know how to replicate the use of that skill in another setting, in another context? However, if you had described what you expected of that, you know, I want you to take risks, and it looks like this today, and we're going to do this, this, and this, and this, and then we'll look at it in the end and see how it felt. Joe's been part of that process, and at the end of it, he thinks, I wasn't so bad at taking risks. I might have another go. Yeah. If you just write on a piece of paper, Joe did quite well in taking risks, but Joe didn't really know he was doing any. Yeah? And you know where your teaching is, and it probably teeters in and out of both, according to time and methods that you're using and what's going on. But the bit that I'm trying to push home is that if it's not overt and it's not explicit, Joe doesn't benefit. Yeah? Okay, which is what that slide says. So, this is what you have to do really, I think, is when you're planning your lessons, your scheme, you have to think with the end in mind. Because if you just take your spec, and you just take what it is that you've got to deliver, and you look at the content, you plan it, and you might scaffold it and think, I've got this, this, and this, and this, and I've got my assessment point. That's great and very necessary tool of teaching. But if you don't actually think about the bigger things, if you don't think about the end in mind, what do I want that hairdresser to be able to do? What do I want that engineer to be able to do? What do I want that scientist to be able to do? What knowledge, understanding, attributes, dispositions do they need to be successful? And hey, what if they can't get a job in hairdressing? What do they need to be able to go and get a job somewhere else? And we know, don't we, that what they need is dispositions to be able to succeed. So you've got to ask yourself this. When you're doing your curriculum design, you start with the end in mind. What do they look like when they're walking out the door? And how will my learning vehicle throughout the year get them to that place? And it will not unless you infuse dispositional learning through it. Does that make sense? Okay. Right. Work with somebody different, but I want you to think like a hairdresser, bearing that in mind. What does a hairdresser look like when they leave college a year on? What's the knowledge, the skills, the dispositions, importantly, that they need? Think like a hairdresser. So the point that I wanted to make with this short activity was that you need to do that thinking. Start with the end in mind. So think like a hairdresser. I mean, think like someone employable, really, isn't it? When you start to unpick it, because the cutting, the blow drying, the shampooing is one part of it, but there's so many other things. So what have we got on your lists? How do you think like a hairdresser?
Competitive.
In what way?
Earning the money. I was just saying a lot of hairdressers in particular work on commission base, so if you're in a salon you've got 500 hairdressers, you can't be...
Lovely. What dispositions are required?
Competitive. Curiosity.
Winning.
No, challenge.
On winner.
Whatever that I don't know.
I would go the other way. I'd say the ability to work with 500 people, because if you're so competitive, you alienate them. That's going to be a hell of a salon to go to, isn't it? You know? So there's a need for being. You're right.
Yeah.
You know, for working fast and hard and getting your share, but equally, if you're grabbing clients off, I can't imagine that's going to go down well with the other people in the salon.
So according to your circumstance, if you were
Mobile hairdresser.
If you're a mobile hairdresser, yeah, you knew your whole
worked on your own,
strategy.
yeah,
Absolutely.
that's true.
Okay.
Certainly within a
Yeah.
So what do you need?
Oh, we have customer service skills.
Yeah, what are they in terms of dispositions?
Approachable, communication skills.
Communication skills. What types of communication skills?
Appropriate to the clients you're working with. So we're saying, you need to be able to adapt your communication to who you're with.
You adapt your communication. That's good.
Yep, and also related to communication, I mean, questioning is very important, and listening to the customer what they want.
It is
so
really
forming
important.
those questions, listening to them.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then memory recall, so that you're actually putting into practice what they want.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Agreeable. I mean, because they work with customers, it's what the customer wants. I mean, maybe the customer doesn't want the right thing, but still if they want it.
Yes, you're tactful, diplomatic.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that that purple hair will quite suit you, madam. Yes.
At your age.
Flexibility.
Flexibility.
So if someone comes in and says, I want this from this magazine, then the hairdresser will say, well, maybe this will suit you more. And then it's sort of that building it together, cooperation. So that's sort of that's the disposition.
It is a disposition, absolutely. Yeah. What else?
Initiative.
Yes.
Initiative, definitely.
Yeah.
You know, because you'll learn a certain way to cut hair, and then somebody turns up and actually you need to be a little bit more imaginative.
Self-motivated, self-starting, to research, to remain current, to have your
To be
professional currency.
competitive,
Yes,
absolutely.
absolutely. Yes.
Because they need to be interested to learn about new products and new styles rather than using the same thing over and over again. They have to have that genuine interest.
They do. They do.
I think we've got a mix of curiosity and creativity that are linked.
Right.
We've got to be curious about what would happen with Elsbeth's hair if you did this, and creative to say, well, actually, it won't work like that, so I can do this and it will look like that.
Yeah.
So it's a mix of it.
Yeah.
Not too creative.
Yeah.
On the continue.
Yeah, because that would take us on to problem solving. Oops, I've just made your hair green, cut your fringe too short, burnt you with the water, got shampoo in your eyes. Real things, aren't they? You know, our hairdressers are going to do all those things, probably.
Hopefully not to the same person.
Okay, so the flavour I'm giving you there is that you have to think about that, whatever it might be, whatever you teach. Start with the end in mind and unpack it. And that will, to some extent, dictate how you then construct your curriculum, how you construct your learning and how you build on it, so that there is that repetitive, intentional opportunity to practice those things. You can have great fun with it, can't you? You can have a great fun day of watching clips, role-playing mistakes, whatever, and getting people to feel what it would be like to get themselves out of that, and then reflect back on it. It's endless you can do, but if you don't recognise the dispositions that you need, you'll avoid them and you'll deliver the content. Yeah? Okay. So, think like A is a kind of really good way of actually going to the end and then working back. Does that make sense? Okay. But to do that, you also need to know what the start point is of your learners, because they will all be, as we all are, in different dispositional places. Okay? So do you recognise any of this? Teachers say that their students can be like this, and they would like them to be like that, which is that notion of a continuum. Yeah? So do you recognise some of this as dispositional attitudes at the moment? Yeah? And this is what we want people to get to. But is that just going to naturally occur unless we do some work with a student to describe what it looks like to get from to? Okay? So we might say, okay, hairdressers, you need to be really great listeners because you've got to really, really tune in to what your customers want, so that you know that you're ticking their boxes, and actually if you know that that's going to go horribly wrong, then you've got to dig into a whole set of communication skills and say, I'm really listening to you, but blah, 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 blah. So what we need to do first, guys, before we actually really try and work with customers, we need to unpick what listening looks like, sounds like, and feels like. And then we can work out where we are individually, and then we can try and do some work on it over the next while and track the progress that we're making. That's the sort of thing that we need to be talking to our students about, not you need to be a good listener. Let's do that worksheet about listening, shall we? And the student writes a sentence, a good listener. A good listener does that, yeah? Okay? So you describe it, and then you say what it sounds like, looks like, feels like. Okay. Back to back.
I was going to say, is there also a need with those, if you're looking for behaviour change or development, we need to keep revisiting it, and not just, you know, like, okay, yeah, we covered listening in week 3, very good. And that's it. Never say it again.
No.
And it doesn't. No.
If you're a teacher that manages dispositional learning all the time, it's a natural thing. You will naturally say, wow, we did listening last week. I've just seen you do it amazingly. Great example. Moved on a bit. Wow. Or, not so much. Let's just recap. Yep. that constant formative assessment and feedback on dispositional learning. I want you to do a quick thing, back to back, and I want you to talk to each other 2 minutes each. What does good listening sound like, look like, and feel like? But back to back. You've told them about what's coming at the end and everything that you're going to do along the way. They've identified through various bits of work that you need to be a good listener, and you're now trying to get them to describe what that disposition actually looks like so they can understand it, so they can develop against it. Because we all agree that that has to be overt, and it is on a continuum. Okay. So, did you enjoy seeing back to back? It was very funny to watch.
No, everyone thought.
Okay. Did you feel listening?
You have to say that's right.
When you haven't got the facial language, you haven't got body language, which is so it is all.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So,
So a continuum then. So you want your learners to really know what it is that you expect of them and what you're going to help them grow against. What is absolute rotten, rubbish listening?
Not looking.
sorry, Elsbeth, what did you say?
Rotten, rubbish. Just rubbish listening. Oh, sorry. Just reminding the punchy later.
Yeah.
Rubbish listening. Alistair.
Yeah. No eye contact.
Okay.
Talking to their mates next door to them.
Okay, talking to their mates, no eye contact, yeah.
Ending sentences before somebody's finished it.
I thought it's called being married rather than
Talking over someone.
Talking over someone, okay.
Just being there.
A little bit better. A little bit better, because remember you want to create a continuum, because this group of people are going to be in different dispositional growth. So, and you don't want to terrify everybody and think, well, I'm there. And we're going to get to there. Have some stages. So what's a bit better? What's a bit better looking like?
Starting to look at someone's looking interested.
Yes.
Maybe not taking it all in, but
Yes.
you're taking a little bit in.
Yes.
And then following that up with a question.
And you're not competing with them, at least you're letting them
Yeah.
speak.
So that's I can hear an expectation there, and I can hear an assessment judgment as well. It's not, you've gone from that to listening a little bit and following it up with a question. Manageable, but for some will be massive. Bit further on.
Giving small feedback signals of understanding, like, yes, I see, right, okay, those kind of expressions.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Anything more?
Keep your mouth shut for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20
It's
seconds.
hard, it's really hard, isn't it? Because your head is already filling the
I
space.
think the hardest thing is when you're aware as a teacher that you're giving the student time for an answer. With some students, you need to leave that a little bit longer. It's blooming difficult.
Yes.
Every second is an hour.
Yeah.
5 seconds is it for giving for students
Yes, yes,
to answer?
yes.
For
Something like that.
dyslexic, it should be 8 seconds. We try 8 seconds.
It's amazing how many teachers answer their own questions.
Oh, absolutely.
Particularly if there's somebody watching them in a lesson observation. Pressure to get the answer.
So aim for a 4-stage continuum, because then that's kind of achievable. This is where I am, this is where I'm going to try and practice, I'm going to apply, and I'm going to get feedback on that. I'm getting better now. I'm the best listener in the world. What does it sound like, look like, feel like?
Active listening. So summarising, this is what you said. Obviously you mean this, and eye contact and the nodding and reassurance.
Sort of conscious about that. Yeah, okay. And much more, which you will unpack and describe. And then quietly, not to put anybody on the spot, you need to say, there's really something that's a massive disposition or skill, or whatever you call it, that we need as hairdressers. So we're going to be working on that a lot. And I'm going to be watching it, and you're going to be practicing it, and we're going to be seeing that you move. And by the time they leave you, they're here. And when they go to an interview to work in a bank, because they can't get a hairdressing job, they can relate how they will be able to listen to a customer's needs and what they will do and everything. Or they'll go and be a hairdresser, or they'll go and do something else, yeah? Because it's the dispositional learning that's the powerful thing, that they can apply in multiple contexts and multiple settings. Does that make sense? If you don't do that work, how can you realistically, fairly, expect them to take that journey with you? Yeah?
Can I just chuck something in from, that I've been that drummed into me in the coaching training I do. And you probably all do it, so if you do it, disregard this. That when we're doing feedback, on that kind of skill or growth development, one of the things that I try and do with the people I coach is to hold back on my judgment on how well they're doing with that thing. It's really tempting to go, you're doing really well on that listening, or you're doing really well on that target, or you're doing really well on that challenge that you've had from the work, from the thing we talk about when we're coaching. It's very tempting to do it, and it's not wrong, but what I found is more powerful is if you can say, how well do you think you've done from where you were? And they make the judgment. And I found that's worked much better for me when I'm working with somebody who's identified a thing they'd like to work on. And each week or each fortnight they come back.
A really excellent point.
And scaling is a really good way to do it. Scaling is very powerful in coaching and very powerful in teaching. So put a number on it for me. Where were you 3 weeks ago, a month ago, 2 months ago? Oh, I was only at 2 or 3. Where are you now? I'd say I'm at a 5 or 6. Why would you say, where have you, you know, all that stuff. That to me, when I'm coaching, it just seems to have a bigger impact on the people than, and I'm trying to sit on my judgment all the time going, I think you did really well.
I think that's a really good point, Alistair. An excellent point. This is for you to take away. Basically, it's you can't go, oh yeah, I'll send it out, because I'll send the PowerPoint out to everybody and all the supporting stuff. Basically, you can't go into a classroom really and say, you can get learners to understand what dispositions are and what they have to be. You can't come in and say, we're managing impulsivity today. You need to find something nice and a snappy language. So, you know, basically in your own time, not now, match some of these. And these are just some suggestions. So if you say, look, you know, we give up too easily, we just all give up here. If we can't do it, you know, so we need to stick to it. What does stick to it look like? That's the same as perseverance, isn't it? Or we need to bring some humour into it because it's all a bit serious. Also, what does that look like, and how do you do that appropriately, and how do you manage that? So, when you're doing dispositions, don't go in and say we're working on dispositions and we're doing it. It's just like buzzkill. But use a language and choose a language. Have it around your walls. You know, what do we do? What's our strategy to stick to it, and how do we know what that looks like and when we're good at it and things like that. Okay. Use a from and a to chart, or some sort of methodology so students know how they're moving along that continuum, and you're talking and using that language and they're part of it, so they can describe themselves at any point in terms of progress and how they're doing. Yeah, not, oh yeah, I've handed in 2 assignments and I've passed 1. That's not how they're doing. That's a part of their progress. Yeah.
So would you get them to maybe match these themselves using the simple language at the bottom with the more technical?
Or they could come up with their own terminology, which is even more powerful. What I'm saying is that what we understand and have unpacked as dispositions needs to be much more obvious. And finally, assessing growth. The ways of doing it is continuous and ongoing. Talk to your learners all the time about it, motivate them, encourage them. If they've had a terrible time at school, or they've got life challenges that limit their success factors, and someone is saying to them, do you know what, you're really growing in this, and you've got so much opportunity, what a massive hit. Just imagine yourself in that situation. And self-assessment, as Alistair quite rightly says, get students to the point where they can self-assess, but you've got to take them there. You can't have that as an expectation, because at first they'll be self-deprecating and really negative about everything, I can't do it. But as they start to feel that they can, through that repetition and those new habits being formed, they will be able to self-assess and be confident, because that's what you want when they're in an interview without you. Okay? So that's learning dispositions, really, in a one-hit thing. To take away, it's what does my curriculum look like? What does the way I structure learning, manage my environment, manage my activities look like? If I started with the end in mind and unpacked it back, what's important? And then what am I going to talk to my learners about so they understand it that? Then how do we unpack it further so they know what my expectations are and they genuinely and fairly have an opportunity to meet them? And how do we measure that growth so they leave successful? They're the questions. If you don't have dispositional learning infused into it, they're missing a fabulous experience. Okay? Is everybody all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.